Folks, hello, it's Denny Carter coming at you for yet another Dad Season show. This is episode 14. And in this episode, we're going to revisit something we talked about in episode 12, which is naturally childhood anxiety and or depression. And an interesting article that I found summarizing recent studies on efforts to address that issue. And it's not what I thought it would be. It hasn't been as successful as I had imagined, and apparently as experts had imagined. So we'll look into that. That'll be the meat of the show. The show's meat. But before that, I want to first take a sip of my coffee while it's still warm. Very watered down coffee, by the way. I've become something of an acolyte in, preaching the good word of weak coffee in a small cup. I think that this is the key to drinking coffee. Folks, I think Americans generally have gotten accustomed to coffee that tastes like, I don't know, sludge. Okay, that's something that you might find in your car engine and pour into your cup and then drink it down. I prefer it to be watery, to be a very light brown color, and I want it in a small cup. Because I want it hot, and I can drink this amount of coffee in a time where it remains hot. I'm not one of these people who will sip on a freezing cold cup of coffee and pretend it's good. It's not. That's terrible. It's terrible. Cold coffee, obviously bad. And please, I'm begging you, do not tell me that I have not had the right kind of cold coffee. Please, I please don't do that. I've had a lot of kinds of cold coffee, and they're all bad. So, yeah, we're gonna get to the meat of the show in a second. I wanted to say to the dads out there that I hope that Mother's Day wasn't catastrophic for you. There's a lot of pressure on Mother's Day, a lot of pressure on the dads, I should say, because you just desperately don't want to mess it up, right? It's like, I mean, you're going to mess up a lot of things throughout the year. Okay. You mess up an anniversary, you mess up a kid's birthday party, you mess up your spouse's birthday party, your partner's birthday, whatever. But you can't mess up Mother's Day. It's just not an option. And the thing is that I've done that. Roughly 3 to 5 times over the 11 years that me and my wife have been parents. Just messed it up. Just didn't plan properly. Didn't really pay attention to what she wanted out of the day. Believe it or not, and you'll be shocked if you know me, it was more about what I wanted out of the day. Hey, you want to go to the driving range, putt a little bit, maybe do some sand wedge work from 40 yards. It could be fun. Are we not having fun with that? No? Why are you walking away? No, I'm kidding. Obviously, I would not do that. But, I have messed up in really not focusing on what my wife wants. I hit it out of the park this year. This is not a brag, because it's like the first time in a while that I've actually not completely screwed up Mother's Day. And I'm proud of myself. And I just wanted to share that with the Dad Season show. Folks, I bought a flower bed for my wife, because for a few weeks now, she said, here's what she said. And this was my clue about what to get her for Mother's Day. She said, I want a flower bed. So then I went, on my phone, and I bought a flower bed. 8 foot by 2 foot. I think it's 10 inches deep. I don't know anything about flower beds. So got it in a box, had to put it together on Saturday morning, was sweating profusely as I pieced it together. I put it together the wrong way. So I had to take it apart and put it back together the right way. And I was wondering why the pieces were not fitting. And I had the rubber hammer and I'm slamming it, bang, 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 bang. Why won't it go in? Why won't this piece go in? This is defective. I'm going to send this back. Amazon better send me my money. It turns out I was doing it all wrong. And I blame that not on myself, obviously. I blame that on the instruction manual. I'm not a handy guy. You know that. I think that goes back to the masculinity we talked about last week. You don't have to be man. You don't have to be handy to be manly. It helps, I guess, in the popular imagination, but I'm not handy. So I need a detailed instructional manual. Okay. And I didn't get one with the flower bed. I just got some pictures of the pieces of the flower bed and how they go together, how the pieces fit, as Tool said in that one song. I can't remember what it is. Somebody tell me what Tool song I'm talking about. There are a lot of white guys in the chat. We know about Tool. And so they're just pictures that go that this piece goes with this piece. Okay. Which way does it go? It didn't say. So I'm trying to jam in the pieces and it's not working. And I almost broke a couple pieces. Thankfully it didn't. Oh, thankfully I didn't. Anyway, I got the thing put together. My wife was very happy. And I think that there's a kind of a lesson here. At least I'm going to take it as a lesson. Listening to what your partner wants can pay off. It's just listening, just filing it away. When she says, I would like a flower bed, you file that away in your brain and says, she would like a flower bed. I would like to go to this place or that place one day. Then you file it away. She would like to go to this place or that place one day. Okay. So I'm going to start doing that more and more, and we're going to see if that works for a happy household. But yeah, Mother's Day was good. Well, as far as the mother part goes, my kid's mom. As far as my flag football team goes, we were massacred, unfortunately, by just a towering team, just a brutally physical team that they tackled our players, which I asked the ref at one point, are we tackling today? Is that what we're doing? Should I tell my guys to take off their flags and then we're just gonna tackle? Because that's what's happening on every single play is my kids are being tackled. They're wrapping around their waist and they're throwing them to the ground. Now, if they had the proper equipment on, I think that could work. It'd be okay. They did not, because again, I want to emphasize this. It's a flag football league. So they didn't have, so the kids are limping off. They're crying. They're coming to me. I'm injured because again, they were being tackled. And long story short, I almost got thrown out of the game. I had some choice words for the ref. And I said those choice words in a very particular way and in a very particular order. So almost got thrown out on Mother's Day. That wouldn't have been good. That wouldn't have been, no. Couldn't have that happen. So he said one more time. I got one more. I got one more warning. And I said, okay, all right, I'll shut up. So Mother's Day was good. Let's go to the comments. Thank you for those who are joining me on the X platform, formerly known as Twitter, and on YouTube, where folks can join on the Dad Season Show YouTube page. Of course, Dad Season Show is also available on iTunes and Spotify. And I have a Patreon page where we talk about the issues sometimes. If folks want to join that to support the show. So we have Jack Anderson in the chat here, and Jack says, "How am I supposed to pick between Best Ball Breakfast with Pete Overzet and Dad Season Show with Denny? It's like trying to pick between my two kids. You got to do it though. That's the thing, Jack. You got to make the call. It's a tough call. No one wants to make it, but you are going to have to make it. You're obviously going to pick me." Kyle Meyer says, "Rare Denny L here. I'm afraid I'm not sure what he's talking about. He's talking about my shirt. I'm wearing a shirt with flamingos on it, a button-down shirt with flamingos. They actually send you this in the mail when you become a dad. I just wanted everyone to know this is what the government sends you, so that you can look like a handsome dad, like me. Yeah, and Eric Belair in the chat has a good point. My dad used to microwave the same cup of coffee over an 8-hour period. That does happen. I mean, I would say on average, I microwave my coffee 3 times in the morning on average, but sometimes the upper limits are 5 to 7 times in the microwave, which is really aggravating. Chris Wood, answering my question about Tool, says, I think it's schism, and I think you're right. I think you are right. Diego Lopez, friend of the show, says it's time to break out the hip drop tackle, kids. Don't stop until you hear a snap or blood-curdling scream of desperate pain. Yeah, I mean, that's kind of where it was going in the flag football game. The hip drop was next. Hopefully there were no hip drop advocates on the field or on the sideline, like there are on the X platform, formerly known as Twitter. Because man, my people on the X platform, they love a hip drop tackle. Man, they love it. Because as they tell me every time the issue comes up, how else are you supposed to tackle someone? The hip drop is the only way to tackle. It's always only been the way to tackle. You have to, that there is no other option for tackling but to wrap around a guy's midsection, throw your legs in the air, and drop your body weight on the back of their legs. That is the only way to tackle a person in football. And I think we know that. And so the league is banning tackling. If they ban the hip drop, no one has ever been tackled any other way. This is what they say. Yes, and Toronto Dave, my guy Toronto Dave, is in the chat, and he says, smash the like button. And yes, please smash the like button. I would love if the folks would subscribe to the channel. That'd be cool. I know there are dads out there. I know you guys are watching. I see the analytics of the various things that I subscribe to tell me who's watching and who's not watching. And they're not adding up. The subscribers of Dad Season Show and the number of viewers I get, they're not quite adding up. The analytics are off. I'm asking you to square those analytics and simply subscribe to Dad Season Show on YouTube. Eric says he loves the shirt. I appreciate that, Eric. Thank you. I'm feeling a little less self-conscious. Diego says, for love of all things, Dad, get an insulated mug. No. I'm not getting an. I have an insulated mug. It sucks. It sucks. No, because you can't microwave it. Okay, it's metal on the inside. It'll explode the neighborhood if I put it in the microwave. So it's like moderately warm for a while, and then that's it. No, it's no good. No good. Sorry, Diego. All right. Before we get into the show's meat, I wanted to mention something I saw on the Dad Reddit, which is actually called Daddit. I became aware of this a couple weeks ago, and I've checked in on the channel, and if folks want to check that out and maybe come with some ideas on what to talk about or whatever, that'd be cool. I found this one kind of tearjerker that I wanted to share with everyone because it hit home with me, and I think it'll hit home with guys to different extents, just because of the way we grew up as boys. This person writes, my father never said to me he loved me. That's a tough one. Tough start to the story. I knew he did, but he never said it. It wasn't really the manly thing to do back then. So when I had kids, I never stopped telling them that I loved them. Even now that they are grown, I still say I love you and say it back, and they say it back to me all the time. My daughter one day had her best friend over for the afternoon. They did their thing, then went to leave. I hugged my daughter and said I love you as she left. Later that evening, when my daughter returned, she told me that her friend confided in her that her own dad had never once told her that he loved her. And when she saw me saying it to my daughter, she felt really sad and a little jealous. My daughter had tears in her eyes as she was telling me this. and said she felt so lucky to have a loving father that cared so much and said so all the time. So, guys, it may seem like a little thing, but these acts of love are noticed and remembered. Say it every day. Sign off your text messages to your kids with "I love you." Say it loud and proud. I'm not there yet, where I haven't. I've never texted my kids, so I don't know. But maybe I will do that. Maybe I will say "I love you" at the end of those texts one day. But yeah, it is something I think that as a generation, again, I speak for all millennials. As a generation, we take for granted because a lot of us, I think, say that more often than our dads and certainly their dads, our grandfathers. I have a story about this. I don't remember all the details, but I do remember I was going to sleep over my grandparents' house one day when I was like 5 or 6. And he, I at the last second, I got cold feet. I hated sleepovers. I was one of those kids who just avoided sleepovers at any cost. So I called my dad to come pick me up, and he was not happy, as I would not be if I were in that position. Okay, if my kid called me at late at night and said, "Hey, Dad, I want to come home now," you better believe I'd be pretty in a pretty bad place. So he came to pick me up. He was mad, and as I left, my grandfather pulled me aside and said, "Hey, don't worry about it." And then he said, "I love you." And this was shocking to me because I had never heard him say that to anybody. I mean, I was only 6 or 7, whatever. But it was very out of character, okay, for like like a hardened, Korean War veteran ex cop to say something like that. And my dad later told me, not at that age, but many years later, said that he was shocked too because his dad had never said that to him. His dad had never said "I love you" to him, but he said it to me. I sensed a little jealousy, I guess, but it was stunning. It was stunning to hear such a gruff old school guy say something like that. And I remember that. I still remember it. I'm 40 and I still remember it. And my dad always made sure to tell me and my brother, that he loved us as kids. To a degree where you're like, did you have to say it in front of my friends? Because now I have to say it. You can't be like, "Thanks, Dad. Thanks for your love." You have to be like, "Love you, Dad. Love you too. All right, I'm gonna go now. We're gonna go to the party, but I do love you. I just don't want to move my mouth, or my friends will see it." And of course, the friends are always like, "Damn, man, that's awesome." Like that you and your dad have that kind of relationship. It is something I think as dads we need to be doing. And I know it can come off. I know saying "I love you" constantly can come off as kind of hollow or shallow. Maybe not shallow, just hollow would be the word. This is like you say it 3, 5, 8 times a day, whatever. It's like, what does it mean? What does something that important, that heavy mean if you repeat it constantly? I do understand that feeling. But I think as dads, we need to be doing that, and that we have to remember that kids appreciate it so much, like way more than we could ever imagine. You don't really remember how you felt as a kid hearing that from your parents. You don't really. You might think you do, but I really don't think that we can like fully grasp that. So as just a reminder to the dads listening to the Dad Season Show, don't forget to say "I love you" once in a while to your kids. It doesn't have to be all the time. It doesn't have to be, but remind them that you do love them, because it doesn't go without saying. It just doesn't. I know we wish it did sometimes, but it doesn't. David is in the chat. David Filippi says, "My great grandfather, who never who never met, apparently never told my grandfather this. Oh, you're going way back. I know because he told my dad once, clearly a lifetime hole in his heart. I think that that's what it was with my grandfather who died in 2017. I think that's what it was, he raised he raised a son and never said that to him. And I got the sense because he was more lovey-dovey with me. He was more, he would come up, he would put his arm around me, or you know pat me on the back, or grab the back of my neck playfully, stuff like that. And he just didn't, like, apparently he did not do that as a dad, but as a grandfather he did do those things. And I think you're right about that. I think that there is some reflection as an old man where you say, man, I didn't do that right. I guess the dad season show, I guess one of the goals here is to make it so that we don't grow up with so many regrets. We are going to have regrets, okay, when we're old men, but maybe not so many. Maybe we can limit the damage and limit the regrets when we hit uh, our elderly years. All right, we're on to the meat of the show. The show's meat. I found this piece in the New York Times last week. It was kind of shocking. The headline is, "Are we talking too much about mental health?" The subtitle is, "Recent studies cast doubt on whether large-scale mental health interventions are making young people better. Some even suggest they can have a negative effect." I'm going to post this in the chat if the folks want to check it out. Um, yeah, so let me read to you some of the findings from this research. And I do, before I get into this, I want to emphasize, and we talked about this in episode 12, about the level of anxiety, the prevalence of anxiety among young people today. Clearly a major problem. I don't take it lightly. And in no way am I suggesting that the findings of this research tell me that, hey, you know what, we should definitely stop all of this mental health stuff. We got to stop that. That's not what I'm saying. Okay, I'm not some kook who found one article on the internet and bases his whole personality around that. Okay, I only do that with football, not with mental health stuff. So I just really want to be clear about that. Anyway, in this New York Times piece, it outlines a problem. About 60% of young Americans with severe depression receive no treatment, according to the Mental Health America nonprofit research group. In crisis, desperate families fall back on emergency rooms where teens often remain for days before a psychiatric bed opens up. There is good reason to embrace a preventative approach, teaching school children basic skills that might forestall crises later, experts say. And, so you have, in the post 2020 world, you have, um, mindfulness and other mental health exercises and programs entering schools as a way to try to get ahead of the problem, try to address it before it becomes a major issue for these kids. And overall, I think this is good, but the research suggests that it has not been so good. We have researchers finding that students who self-labeled as being have anxiety or depression, felt that they had less control over depression and were more likely to catastrophize and less likely to respond to distress by putting their difficulties in perspective compared with peers who had similar depression symptoms. One of the study's authors said this was no surprise. People who self-label, quote, appear to be viewing depression as a biological inevitability, she said. She continues, people who don't view emotions as malleable, view them as set and stuck and uncontrollable, tend to cope less well because they don't see a point in trying. And this has sort of been an offshoot of the emphasis on, you know, treating anxiety and depression. And it's something I've thought about this because I know, my kids do the mindfulness thing in school. It's been a big thing post pandemic. And I do think that teaching kids to constantly think about their anxious or depressive feelings without providing more help or more guidance, I feel like that could go sideways. I feel like that model is not good. And I think it's a model based, unfortunately, on profit because mental health is an industry. Okay. And, companies, organizations, they sell these mindfulness programs to schools. It's become very profitable. And, so there's now a financial aspect to this and a market aspect to this that doesn't really incorporate the well-being of the students involved. And it reminds me a lot about a lot of the war on drugs, right? The war on poverty, the war on what else do we have a war on? War on obesity. Those wars have made all of those issues worse. Okay, way worse. Uh, and part of it is because what we call waging the war means getting corporate interests involved in fighting the war. The war is simply fought by people hoping and looking to turn a profit. I think the same thing has happened in part, not maybe not entirely, but in part with mental health. Um, we have the mindfulness thing is especially concerning, and the results are not great. In the summer of 2022, the results of a landmark study on mindfulness training in British classrooms landed like a lead balloon. Uh, the trial followed about 28,000 teenagers over 8 years. It had been launched in a glow of optimism that the practice would pay off, improving the students' mental health outcomes in later years. Um, the results were disappointing. The authors reported, quote, no support for our hypothesis that mindfulness training would improve students' mental health. In fact, students at highest risk for the mental health problems did somewhat worse after receiving the training, the authors concluded. By the end of the 8-year project, quote, mindfulness is already embedded in a lot of schools, and there are already organizations making money from selling this program to schools, said one of the doctors involved in the research. And it's very difficult to get the scientific message out there. Researchers, and that's what I was referring to, is the business aspect of this, I think, is corrupting uh, and undermining the real goal of these programs. Researchers in the study speculated that the training programs, quote, bring awareness to upsetting thoughts, end quote, encouraging students to sit with darker feelings, but without providing solutions, especially for societal problems like racism or poverty. They also found that the students didn't enjoy the sessions and didn't practice at home. Another explanation is that mindfulness training could encourage co-rumination, the kind of long, unresolved group discussion that churns out problems without finding solutions. Yes, exactly, exactly. That's what I meant a few minutes ago when I said, okay, yes, the mindfulness training can be good in getting young people to focus on the here and now, which is important. You're not to get them to not get lost in the future and worrying about the future or fretting about the past, being depressed, being depressed about the past, being anxious about the future, and to stop and say, no, I'm here right now. And that's all I can control. And that's all that is right now. So that's good. But when you get young people, undeveloped brains, not much life experience, right? And you get young people to finally sit and stop in a quiet place and focus on that, right? And be mindful of the present moment, then then what? Then they say, "Oh, the present moment, I'm miserable." Right. That's great. I'm gonna walk away here from feeling, let me see, worse than I did when I walked in. the co-rumination that the piece talked about, that the research talked about. So it feels like schools, it is so well intentioned. This is so well intentioned, okay, and I believe that there are a lot of good people trying to do good work here to help kids with these feelings, very difficult feelings. It's difficult for us as adults, like, it's got to be doubly, triply difficult for them. So I'm not dismissing that. Lots of good people trying to do good things for other people. Also, you're taking a sledgehammer to a problem that requires a scalpel. Okay, it's the same thing with the war on everything, right? With the war, like, just say the war on obesity, right? It's like, well, eat less sugar. Just simply eat less sugar. That's not it. Like, I don't know what is it, but that's not it. Actually, I recommend folks read a book called I believe it's called Fat Talk. Let me just see. Yeah. Fat Talk. Really good piece, or not good piece. Really good book. And as a bonus, my sister-in-law is quoted in there, and she has some great insight into the real problems of obesity and fat shaming and diet culture, which is just so incredibly toxic. It hurts. Um, so check out Fat Talk. But yeah, so with any sort of like all encompassing war on whatever, you're not going to be able to address specific needs. And I think that that's what's happening here, is that kids are coming away from mindfulness training and other similar programs and thinking, okay, well, I now know that I'm not happy, and I'm going to self-diagnose with anxiety and depression. And this is, like the piece says, in by a biological inevitability. There's simply nothing I can do about it. And that is, I don't think that is the attitude or the approach that we want for young people. It's certainly, look, I just speak for myself and my kids. I definitely don't want my kids to ever feel these feelings and then think, I simply got it from mom or dad or grandma or grandpa or whatever. And there's nothing I can do. I'm just always going to feel these feelings. That can't be the point. That cannot be the point of all this. All this effort, all this money, all this time, and all these resources, right? All this airtime, all this ink spilled over mental health over the past 4 or 5 years. The end result cannot be that we're teaching a generation of people that, yeah, yeah, you have anxiety and you have the depression, and there ain't nothing you can do about it. Sorry, kids. I reject that. I mean, I just there's got to be another solution, and there is another solution. The article goes on to talk about ways that we can make this a little bit better. Um, there's one more thing I wanted to mention from the piece, and then we can get into a discussion in the chat. Jessica Gold, the chief wellness officer for the University of Tennessee system, said the college students she sees are recognizably different, more comfortable speaking about their emotions and more willing to be vulnerable. They also overuse diagnostic terms and have the self-assurance to question a psychiatrist's judgment. Quote, it's sort of a double-edged sword, she says. Um, we want people to talk about this more, but we don't want that to lead to overdiagnosis or incorrect diagnosis or overtreatment. We want it to lead to normalizing of having feelings. This is probably an offshoot of the internet in general, where I'm guilty of this sometimes, and we definitely saw a lot of it, during the COVID years. People thinking that they're an expert because they looked up one thing online and they read an article, and they, without any idea how to interpret a research article, or the terminology or any kind of context or background in the uh, epidemiology or whatever it was, right? And they just read that and say, well, now I know the truth about this or that, right? And so I think that kind of naturally shifts over to mental health. You watch a few TikToks on anxiety or depression and you say, "Well, that's me. That's what I got." And so you're able to talk the talk, right? This diagnostic lingo, right? Everybody talks like a therapist now because that language is pervasive. It's in TV shows, it's on the radio, it's on every single podcast. It's everywhere all the time. We are inundated by therapy talk and these big words that were not in the culture at all before, I don't know, again, 4 or 5 years ago. That's roughly, I think, the timeline. So now everybody's an expert. Everybody goes around thinking that they're an expert on mental health. And so kids go to college and they say, "No, no, here's what I have." And I'm going to push back. I'm going to push back on you, Doc, because I saw one TikTok. I saw one TikTok and it said the opposite. It didn't confirm what you're saying, and it's on TikTok. It has to be real. Or Facebook for the boomers, or I don't know what millennials. How are millennials misinformed? How do we? I guess the X platform, formerly known as Twitter. That's how we're misinformed. All right, we're gonna get into the chat here, and then we'll finish up the discussion. Toronto Dave says that makes sense. Identifying as an anxious person can almost be self-fulfilling. And Dave, yes, I'm with you. I also identify as someone who is often anxious about whatever, about anything, about nothing, about being anxious. Okay, so I get that, and I believe, yes, 100%. You're right in saying it can be self-fulfilling to like concede that that's just simply who you are. I am I am a worried guy. I am a sad guy. And you base your whole personality on that. And that's just a bridge to nowhere. You go nowhere from there. There's no way to make things a little better if that's your thinking, if that's your mindset. Toronto Dave also says emotional maturity skills can be developed. It's not an inherent weakness. Exactly. Diego Lopez back in the chat, where we're in a time where people have lots of information, but very few of us actually know how to understand or use that information, which is a skill I feel we completely ignore or dismiss. Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm saying about this internet culture mindset where the real truth is buried and I found it. And now I know everything and I can't be told anything. Again, I'm sometimes guilty of this. Okay. Oh, wow, I didn't know that about what doctors, how doctors treat weight gain. I didn't know. Well, now I know the real truth. It's like we're being red pilled all the time on every topic possible, right? And like, oh, I took the red pill on this and that and this and this and sports and blah and in health and science. I know everything now. And oh, it's real bad. And yeah, Matthew Kozlowski is in the chat, says book recommendation, The Death of Expertise by Tom Nichols, talks about that very problem in society. I've heard of that book. I read an excerpt once. It does seem very good. Joey Gorla is in the chat. Joey says that he read somewhere that lots of people now are going through doctor after doctor just trying to find someone to affirm their actions. Yes, I think it was the Washington Post that had a piece, I want to say 6 months ago, maybe longer, on this issue where people are chronically logged on. They're spending all day at work when they're supposed to be making dinner, when they're supposed to be with their families. They're instead on their phones, on their laptops, and on their tablets, just grinding research about the condition they know they have, right? And but they can't find a doctor to tell them that that's what they have. So, and mostly folks with lots of resources, rich people. Let's just be honest, rich people who are able to bounce around to different doctors, who have great health insurance, who don't care about copays, who don't care about any of the attached costs of doing this doctor hunting, right? they bounce around from office to office until they finally find someone who says, yes, that's exactly what you have. Would you like the medicine for it? Or whatever the issue is. Yeah, that's horrific. That is not the way it should be. And I get that. I do get the inclination to self-diagnose because, folks, I have Googled the hell out of health issues slash scares that I've had in my life. Okay. I mean everything. I was once seeing a black dot in my field of vision that would kind of come and go at, like, mostly when I was driving. And I think I Googled that for like on and off for like 5 days straight until I had diagnosed myself with eye cancer. I had eye cancer, unfortunately. This was a 100% certainty to me, an expert on eye cancer. The reason I was an expert is because I Googled it a lot, a lot. Get different Google terms. You just never know what's going to come up. Then you click on one article, it links to another, it links to another, it links to the source material. And folks, in the source material, there you go. You found your eye cancer diagnosis. That's what you found. And so I went to the doctor. I said, "But doc, I have eye cancer. I'm sorry to say. I seeing a little black dot. So unfortunately, I do have eye cancer." And she looked at me and she ran a couple tests and she said, "You don't have anything. You're perfectly fine." And that dot went away pretty quickly after that. I believe it was a product of my anxiety. My anxiety about the black dot. Maybe I did see it for one time or something, but then I became so anxious about it. I saw it everywhere, or at least I thought I saw it everywhere. Right? So you ruminate, and that's what the New York Times piece talks about: the rumination. Right? You think, you think, you think. Black dot in my eye. I see it. It's in my field of vision. What does it mean? This study says that. That study says that. It all adds up to I'm dying. I'm dying because I see a black dot in my field of vision, and that's what you get. That's what you get with the internet. Matthew's back in the chat. Uh, he says I'm torching the rich quotient of fans who could engage in the dad season show. Look, I'm not saying it's bad to have great health insurance. To be able to afford a lot of medical expenses, that sounds cool to me. That sounds great. So I would recommend folks check that out. I do see. I'm just going to end the show on this note. I do see sometimes that my kids pick up this language that they see on YouTube or whatever, which is just the bane of my life right now. But so be it. They see it on YouTube, they hear it from friends, and I hear them kind of talking in these diagnostic ways, right? The therapy talk that I mentioned a few minutes ago. And that's, obviously none of us who grew up in the 80s and 90s, none of us talked like that. None of us, okay? It just wasn't a thing. You didn't you I definitely never even heard the word anxiety growing up. I'm pretty sure. I'm probably heard depression, but never anxiety. Um, that's not good, but I think that there is probably a middle ground between never hearing it in your upbringing and then constantly hearing about it and constantly being told how to deal with it. I don't think that is the solution. I feel like the pendulum has swung too far in the other direction. It's too far. We weren't doing it right in the 90s. We weren't. That was not right. And then today, and this is not my opinion, this is the research, okay? And I'm not alone. I promise I'm not alone. But the research is saying we may have gone a little too far. We may have assumed that mass use, society-wide use of mindfulness was going to cure everything, was going to get ahead, was going to help us deal with the consequences of mental health, this mental health crisis, or whatever you want to call it. And it turns out maybe not true. Maybe that's not the case. One person in the article in the New York Times piece says, no one is coming to me. The doctor says, no one's coming to me saying, I want to be diagnosed with anxiety and depression because I think it's cool. And that's honestly, that's just completely operating in complete bad faith. No one is saying that. Okay. That's just a straw man. No one's being like, well, the kids, the teens, they just want to be cool and be anxious and depressed all the time. That's not it. No one is saying that. No one is even implying that. But hammering home these mental health messages all the time, I think, is creating generations of people who can't stop thinking about it. And again, there's got to be a middle ground. I don't have the as a humble podcaster, I don't have the solution, but there's got to be one out there. Thanks for joining me for the Dad Season Show. Join me next Monday for episode 15 at 1 o'clock Eastern on YouTube and the X platform, formerly known as Twitter. Until then, it remains Dad Season.